Roger, thanks for dropping by. A while back I did a video based on this young tree and what I ought to do to it to get it to branch. Now I'll let you into a secret. I do not like trees that have got an S-bend at the beginning because they all look the same. So getting hold of that and putting an S-bend in it is not an option. I've been into pine forests in many different countries and I've never seen one looking like that. They tend to look like that, only bigger. So my idea is to get some branch structure in, but I do have another idea based on what this has already done. Now the options I put forward, and thanks for the people who commented, it's greatly appreciated, various views. The options I thought of was to take it off here, below this, what is going to be a swelling, whether we like it or not. So take it off just below there, and hopefully it would branch lower down. This is a single extension, so that's a year's growth, probably last year's growth. That's a very long extension. Next option was to take that in half, hoping it would branch lower down, but then just a little bit of observation shows a little bit of a cluster going on here that would possibly form a swelling as well. Obviously what we don't want in trunks is a swelling leaving the bit below it narrower than the bit above it, if you see what I mean, in the taper stuff. Yeah, and that's the other thing, I'm not obsessed with taper. You know, I mean, when you see those trees that start off like that and go donk, 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 with three little piddly branches sticking out the sides, that's not how trees grow, so I'm not into that shape at all. I like some taper in the trunk, but I like it to look realistic. Because like I said, go out into a pine forest and look at the difference between the trunk at the ground level and the trunk halfway up, and you'll see a gentle taper. You won't see it going like that. So those were the options. Cut it down here and try and get it to branch out lower down, which would give me a very short base to start with and no leader. So I'd need to then select a branch to be a leader, which would automatically give me taper, all being it a bit abrupt, you know, to go from that to a little tiny branch. Coming down halfway, that's not a bad option. It's a bug, but it's an ant. Ants are okay. And then this bit at the top. And then I watched somebody else's video today, and it's a style of bonsai that I like a lot. And I've looked at an awful lot of bonsai pictures and the real thing of that style, and I appreciate that it's actually quite difficult to achieve. It seems so simplistic. It's the literati style, you know, the less is more, where you've got some interest in a trunk, not necessarily too much taper in it, and then a small amount of foliage near the top or hanging down from the top, yeah, or possibly even twisting round the back. But when you look at a good one, it's difficult to explain why that one's good and that one next to it isn't, why one works and one doesn't. So it's not, I believe, as easy as it sounds, but I could possibly have a go with this, as I've already got quite long and thin. Now I haven't got any movement in this trunk. Quite honestly, that can be added any time. That's not a desperate thing to do now. It doesn't have to be done now. And as I said, I'm not putting an S-bend in it, so that's out of... but if you notice up here, we've got a... Do you know, I keep looking at that thinking, I've got a feeling it's actually... Yes, it is. I was going to say it's broken. I was thinking that if that was fixed, that could be my start of a literati. If I take the leader off, and this would be my first branch to get some structure right at the very top. But I had a feeling that was damaged, so we're back to the options. Option 1, just below here. Well, I suppose you could say option 1, leave the flipping thing alone and let it grow. But I don't know enough about, you know, this is an Austrian black pine. Pinus nigra, it says here. And I don't know enough about it to know what it's going to do next. If I just leave it alone, what's it going to do? And I don't want a 3-foot tree with 4 branches at the top. You see what I'm getting at? And my feelings are that if I leave it alone, that's what I'll end up with because of its rate of growth. If that's a year's growth on a very, very young tree, and we've got another one coming up here, so we're up to there in a few years. Well, we still haven't got any branches. So you could say, well, leave it and let the trunk thicken up. The trunk will thicken up at some point in the future anyway. And if it's got some branches to go with that thickening up, they will aid the trunk getting thicker. Yeah? So we have 3 cutting tools. We have a knob cutter, as it's called. We've got the secateurs for the big stuff. We ain't going to need either of those 2. And we've got my pruning shears. So we've got option 1, leave it alone. Option 2, take it off below what is that swelling, effectively. Option 3 there. And option 4 down here, which would force branches much lower down and would imply that we will have to choose a new leader. And the other options will need a new leader as well, because apart from option 1, leave it alone, the leader will be gone. Now, one person said, err on the side of caution. Take the leader off and see what happens, and then make a further decision down the line when you've seen what happens. If by taking that off it pushes out a couple of branches right at the top, then its style of branching has been established and you can come lower down, knowing that the branches will come out, you know, not too far below the cut. So it's coming off there initially. So that's probably all it's going to get for some considerable time. I'm not going to bother trying to put it in a bonsai pot. I don't want to disturb the roots now. I don't see any point. It's reasonably well rooted in this pot, I would imagine, and it's growing reasonably well. So that's all I'm going to do. Now it's lost its leader, it's going to respond by doing something. It might dump all its needles. But it's still got a reasonable set of needles to feed itself, you know, the old solar panels and all that. I'm still not quite sure about these long needles here. Should I trim those? But at the end of the day, if they're capable of photosynthesizing, they'd be better left. And some people say if you pluck needles, you're liable to get a bud. And others say you're more likely to get a bud if the needles stay there. So all the needles are going to stay there, and that's all I'm going to do for now. And I might not even do anything else until into next year. But I want to see the reaction down this trunk. What are you going to do next? Good game, isn't it? Good game, good game. See you next time. Oh, and thanks to everybody who did leave a comment making suggestions and with their reasoning. It's greatly appreciated. You know, I mean, as I said, this is a new type of tree for me. I thought I was getting a Japanese black pine, but read the name wrong. I would imagine that the growth patterns would be very similar to both anyway. But anyway, so we will give this a chance. But another thing I wanted to say on this channel is I'm not going to go mad getting lots of starter trees. I'm 70. Well, and a bit. Yeah? And some, as they say. I'm realistic. I don't know how long I've got on this planet. I doubt if I've got 30 years to get a mature bonsai from a starter tree. So what's the point in starting it unless that's the thing you enjoy doing most? I like looking after more mature trees and guiding them, but I can't afford to go out and buy mature bonsai at hundreds of pounds, if not thousands. I just haven't got that sort of money lying around. And I couldn't justify it to myself or my children. You know, if I go out and get a lovely Japanese white pine that's sort of 30, 40 years old, and I've paid, you know, £4,999 for it, and it dies in the winter, how do I justify that to my kids? So I'm not doing it. So I'll work with the trees I've got, some of which are coming along nicely, and I like working with them. And we have got a few new trees. As far as starter trees are concerned, I've got my blackthorn. I don't think they're all going to live, but you know, they're just sticks in pots basically. But what I've got in mind for those is a clump style, whereby once I've established which ones are actually alive, I'll bind them all together at the base and get them to lead off from that base sort of thing. Blackthorn often have that sort of bush style as a tree, which would lend itself to having multi-trunks. So that's the idea for that. I've got a tiny little juniper in a pot that's not even 6 inches tall. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with that, apart from just watch it for a while. But I'm not going to get anything much out of that in my lifetime. So we shall see. And then I've got my collected Scots pine, the two new ones that I collected this year. One that I yanked out of the ground, which is actually growing quite well, I'm surprised. And then the other one that was actually dug up that isn't growing so well, but they were both treated differently. One of them was actually wired, and a lot of the leaders were left to grow. The other one had all of its candles taken off and hasn't had any wiring or anything done. It's had branch selection done. So there's those two. Those are new trees for this year. They're not young trees. You know, I mean, they could be 10 years plus old. Because of where they were growing, they're naturally stunted through lack of nutrients and highly acidic soil. So they're not young trees. You know, they're not a stick in a pot like these are. They're something I can work with, which I enjoy. And I will hopefully collect a few more trees, but I'm not collecting things like this. I'll collect trees that have got some substance and with an amount of effort can be turned into something that its future can be more predictable and we can enjoy working on them. So that's where we'll go. And yeah, so anyway, thanks for the offers of help with this one. Obviously, when there are lots of choices, not everybody gets to win. So please don't be upset if I didn't choose your bit. I've explained why I've done what I've done. And those that made that as a suggestion, thanks for that. And yeah, we'll go from there. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.